Beautiful family, welcome back to the Soul Collective podcast. I am so grateful and excited to be connecting with Sherry Mosley today. Sherry is an Akashic Enlightenment author, teacher, and channel, and she holds a Master's of Science in Oriental Medicine, is a certified shamanic healing practitioner and counselor, Akashic Records practitioner, and Reiki master. And Sherry uses Akashic Enlightenment to help humanity realign with their true self, follow higher guidance, and live a better quality of life. Sherry, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Soul Collective podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. I'm really curious. I always love hearing about people's journeys, but I feel like for you, I understand that you were really immersed in this learning from a very early age. And I'm curious what your experience of that has been like to really embrace, what some may consider woo-woo or out there, and really have that be, your path wholeheartedly from early on.
Yeah, it was, it's part of my soul path, I guess. The plan was already set when I came in to be a part of, it was kind of like a hippie Christian community in San Francisco in the 80s that my parents were a part of. And it was primarily focused on, you could say, they call it, the Christ consciousness, right? So it wasn't really Christian, it was just Christ light oriented. And, when you're a child growing up in that, you're not really aware of the environment that you're in, right? But everybody was very, a lot of love and humanitarianism. They tell us stories of like saints, and it was very like a Waldorf school, right? Very alternative, where they're teaching you to be yourself, to align with who you are. We did a lot of arts and crafts, storytelling, creative writing, lots of everything was creative, right? And so it was focused on allowing yourself, your true self, to be expressed and to come through, as well as connecting to, higher dimensional planes of being, consciousness, spirits, right? Um, and yeah, it was just a very nourishing community. If anything, it was hard coming out of it into the real world, realizing that the real world is much more dualistic, right? And I've actually had some people from the community come back around, or they were a part of it, and they found me, and then they realized I had that upbringing, and they say, "Oh, we're glad to see you're continuing the work." So, it's yeah, coming full circle, I guess. But just coming into that community was one part, but I later found I was born with a shamanic blood lineage, as well as a psychic blood lineage, right? So it comes through the bloodline of this heritage, and it's really a matter of surrendering to it and not getting in the way of it. Because I used to try to shut down the psychic abilities when I was younger. That not go well at all. It just created more fear, right? And it's just a matter of, honoring the what we call the non-ordinary reality dimensional space, and learning to communicate with other beings, other spirits in a benevolent, helpful way, because they want to help just as much as, many of us light workers want to help Earth go through the ascension that's occurring. And it's been occurring.
Yeah, there's so much there that I am so excited to explore. And I think,
It's
you
like,
know,
how much time do we have?
yeah, truly. And, I think one of the things that really excites me about that is, your upbringing where you were describing how creativity was just like encouraged and flourished, and you were immersed in that. And I find, I think that can be so unique, because when you think about schooling, there can be such a emphasis in some school educational systems around testing and around the left brain and
Oh yeah.
around that type of development. And I really truly believe that creativity is, one of our most powerful resources, and to be able to
Oh yeah.
really tap into that and let it, without any limits, sounds like.
Hmm.
Was there ever a point for you where you sort of became fearful of the gifts, or did you really?
Oh yeah, I started off well as a child. You don't really know what's happening, but I used to tell my mom about an invisible friend that I had, and then one day she just moved to New York. It's like, well, how would this little child even know where New York is, So my mom, saw it happening. Um, and then I'd say, usually in the shamanic tradition, you usually get you mature into your abilities and your beingness when you go through puberty, right? The hormones then kind of bring you into this adulthood and they ground in. So that's usually where then the ego comes in, right? And it grabs onto these abilities. And I talk about my Akashic Enlightenment book about, sitting in the high school library looking at the Time magazine books about like a series about supernatural phenomenon and abilities, and I was really curious about it. And then it just started happening more. I'd say, more in my 20s, where I would go someplace, here on the West Coast, San Francisco, Bay Area. There are some older buildings, right? If you go to an old inn, and I'd feel beings or passed on souls there, and that would scare me, especially if I came into an angry one.
Mm,
That would terrify me. Which that really peaked when I was in Paris. There's a lot of passed on souls in Europe in general, but in Paris it was intense, and I would get, paralyzed in that fear because I felt um, it's kind of like, if someone just walked into your bedroom while you're sleeping and they're looking at you. You're like, wait a minute, this is not appropriate. Where's the boundary? You violated my space. But then it's happening on the spiritual realm, which is where I would just be really scared because I didn't know how to shut it down. And that's when I did um, or why I did my training with shamanism.
mm,
I studied with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies and a lot of their intensive, immersive programs, and just got comfortable with being with spirits and realizing, oh, I have a say in this conversation. Why didn't I even realize that before? Right? But it's just like communing with people in this reality, right? Except, there are some beings in the what we call the middle earth, the middle space. It's not the upper world or lower world, and they do have somewhat of their own agenda,
mhm.
so that's where if you're a medium, you need to be able to say no to some souls and yes to others. But the shamanic work I do now, I'm just connecting to the higher realms, the higher frequencies. And so I don't have that anymore. I just kind of say no to it. Every now and then, there's a soul that needs assistance crossing over. Again, this happened last time I was in Europe. There's just a lot of old buildings there. And, I can sense when things have happened. I don't know if you ever watched the show Medium.
Mhm.
It's a really good representation of being able to sense what has happened. It shows it, what has happened,
Yes.
and how you pick up on that energy, and then learning to work with that. It's different for every psychic medium, but it's part of the journey of becoming empowered with the ability, and then handing that. So I did a Course in Miracles where they talk about you hand over your abilities to the universal divine, right? Because there's lots of ways to be a psychic medium. And so I've surrendered mine to, the divine source, universal intelligence. What are you asking me to do? What are you asking me to bring through? What do you want me to do with these abilities? I would like them to be of good, to help people. And so
Yeah.
that's how, I really came into Akashic Enlightenment and doing readings and healing work for people.
That's so beautiful. I really truly believe like our intention creates our reality, and it's so important to be so clear, aligning with the highest divine love and light and frequencies are, setting
Mm-hmm.
forth that intention and powerful reminder um, is so helpful. And I imagine, I'm just curious about that journey of really, stepping in and gaining clarity around the work that you desire to be doing in the world. What does that look like when you're describing sort of like the middle realm, if you will, with spirits, and then your kind of intention to work with the higher realms?
Well, I'd say at this point, I just don't work with the middle realm. It's just not where I was called to.
Yeah.
When I went really deep with my Akashic, or sorry, my shamanic practice, I opened up the Akashic records, and my spirit guides told me, we're going to give you this, and we want you to teach this, and we want you to do this. So I didn't really and I follow my higher guidance. It's a shamanic, um, you know, lesson or teaching that you stop asking your human teachers, and eventually that you go to them and they just say, "Well, journey on it.
Mm,
Ask the spirits. Let them teach you." Right? And so you surrender to that higher teaching because it's of a higher intelligence than any human would have, because it's coming from a higher place that's non-dualistic, not ego driven, right? And so when that happened, it just, you just surrender to it. It's not really something you feel like, I mean, I guess I could just say, no, I don't want to do that. But, it just had this weight to it of, do this, write these books, use this, teach Akashic Enlightenment, do this. And when you're in that space, you're no longer working with passed on souls. The only time I work with passed on souls at this point is if I'm doing a reading with somebody and they have lost somebody that they are recovering from, right? So I'll clean up the soul contracts and the energy so that they can come to a place of acknowledging that the soul is now on the other side, right? Because a lot of the pain and the suffering that we go through is the feeling of the loss of the soul being here and running that contract with them here. And then when they're on the other side, it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm still running the contract and they're not here anymore. And that can lead to a lot more pain and suffering. So we do a lot of the clearing up, let any last minute messages from that soul come through as well, because they may hang around because they're like, wait, I have some things to say, I don't want to go yet either. And
yeah.
that can pull on us because we feel them still there. So that's the only time. And that's if it comes in. I don't like sit here and do just mediumship sessions. It's just part of, whatever's in the highest and best for the person and what they're going through, what they need healing and clearing on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like you have such a beautiful connection with your support team and higher, consciousness. And I'm curious about that path for you of deepening that connection and what that looked like for you.
It just kind of happened, I guess, over time. Kind of like, you learn different things in school and then you just continue the practices. So I was really good at continuing the daily practice, learning and using what I was taught. And when I would go through difficult periods, I would go deeply into shamanic journey. And that's when a lot of the transformation just started happening, as well as when I read A Course in Miracles. The book itself is channeled in Christ consciousness frequency. They call it Holy Spirit. I call it, you're opening up this pillar of light above the head, accessing all of the chakras above the head, opening them so that we are connecting again with our ascended consciousness, which is more or less also what Akashic Enlightenment does. Right? There's many practices, in like the Eastern traditions that work more on opening this higher consciousness, but here in our civilizations, we don't focus any really, or little time doing that. Um, so I would say A Course in Miracles really cranked everything up to this higher super frequency. And I understand now why. I mean, look at the last 2 years here on Earth. This is what they were telling me. They're saying things are going to get intense, they're going to get crazy, and people are going to need this. I said, what are you guys talking about? And they're like, just do it. I said, okay. So I have learned from the shamanic practice, and probably, I mean, if you look at it back to being a young child in a place where I was taught to just be creative and let things flow through, right?
Yeah.
Well, what was the harm in letting something so benevolent and light filled? Oh, there is none. So why am I going to get in the way of it? Who am I to get in the way of something that is bigger and greater than me? Well, I'm just going to surrender to that, And for me, I do talk about in my book that, when I first started kind of opening up the realm more, this is, I think, yeah, while I was doing A Course in Miracles, um, I started doing mediumship because I was uh, in a shamanic drum circle, and was a medium as well as a shamanic practitioner. And I talked to her and did a couple of sessions, and she says, oh yes, your great 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 grandmother was a very powerful shaman, and she wants to work with you, so do some mediumship sessions to connect with her. And so once I started doing that, when I opened that doorway, that's when there were just these massive angels that showed up in my living room, as well as ascended master Jesus. It's like, okay, there's something happening here, right? And that's when I first started getting a lot of instruction. And it's kind of like, how to explain it, saying, there is a weight, and there is a to a see, I start to get emotional because it's such a deep connection. It's very humbling to come into the presence of a being that has and carries so much pure unconditional love. And when you feel that love, whatever message is coming with it, it's not even saying yes, it's like, my honor to do this. Out of respect of what you are bringing forward, it is my honor to be able to follow through with what you are asking of me, because it's the energetic presence, right? I mean, if the Dalai Lama asks you to do something versus your mailman or mailwoman, there's a different weight to it, right?
Yes.
Just because of their frequency that they're carrying and where this message is coming from. So same thing when these higher divine spirits
Yes.
come in. There's this, I am on, I will.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And for me, as you're sharing, it's, bringing up the energy of really saying yes to your heart, because I feel like sometimes we can have those whispers, we can have that intuitive knowing, but truly saying yes, putting both feet in and,
Yeah.
responding to that call. And I think as you're sharing, like that divine presence, that divine light, it's hard to say no to that.
Yeah. Definitely, definitely. It's because it's pure. You can feel that there is not um a lower density or a fear-based agenda. So there's no polarity in it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, in your sharing of accessing higher chakras, I think sometimes we focus on the, seven most commonly, shared
Oh, our body chakras.
our body chakras. Yeah. But I guess a couple questions there with accessing, the upper chakras is, do you
Mm-hmm.
ever find it, um, difficult to maybe you really come back in and ground into your physical body? Do you have any practices there? And, second part to that question is, do you feel like really like there's a lot, the clearing work needs to be done before really being in those upper chakras?
The second part's a longer answer. The first part, very simple. At first it's part of the soul makeup of the person. And your soul is going to be represented, more or less in your astrological makeup. It's the frequency that you carry, you embody. You chose this body for a reason. And I have, I'm a double Capricorn. I have a lot of earthy planets. I have a Venus in Pisces. So I can go really high, but then I can keep it really, earthy and grounded.
It's a great balance.
It is a good balance. Yeah. I made a good decision on this birth date and lineup that I chose.
Yes.
But really, it is also about your lifestyle, right? And this is more of like the Asian medicine practice, although they told us too when we did our shamanic training, you have to eat meat. You cannot not eat meat, because what meat does is it builds the blood, and the blood is what houses the spirit in the body. And when you are jumping to non-ordinary reality and basically flinging your spirit to the other side, you want to have what I call a good tether, right? You want to be anchored in so that when you go, it's easy to come back, right? You've got a good root here. The other part is, on my day-to-day life, I have a paleo diet, so I do eat a lot of meat, but that's what my body really likes and works with. And then I just spend a lot of time, exercising in nature. I love swimming, hiking, those things help you stay grounded. Also doing what are considered mundane tasks, right? But also those are kind of meditative tasks, doing the dishes, doing the laundry, cleaning the house, right? And you just kind of get used to going back and forth. And it really depends on, how much time you're spending in the spiritual realm, like doing a 5-day retreat in Shasta. Yeah, it takes a little time to get grounded when you come home, right? But I have my practices that I do, and I also will do shamanic journeying and connect with the spirits, and they'll help me to ground my energy as well, which I really needed to do that. This that switch that we went through of December of 2021 to January 2022. Whoo!
A big switch.
Yeah, big frequencies came in. They are so high frequency. It was like, wow, okay, we're going to anchor you down to the ground here. And then, a lot of the work I was doing then is just focusing more on the body, cleansing, revitalizing. Not the energy is already coming in at so high frequency. We're focusing more on, the 7 chakras in the body and getting them in attunement and alignment with everything else that's coming in, right? So sometimes, yeah, we will switch to doing work with these chakras, and then also like what we call the dantian, the upper, middle, and lower dantian, which are the main elixirs in Asian medicine that more or less anchor the soul into the body, right? And they're kind of the main hubs of high frequency. You could call it grail light, grail frequency. And then those are like the main pools that the rest of the chakras then align with in the body. And then the higher chakras just kind of load in the higher knowledge and frequencies into those main portals.
Yeah. I love the combination between shamanic and Asian medicine, and it just probably creates such an interesting perspective.
Well, I mean, Asian medicine is, of course, shamanic medicine. How do you think they come up with, what is the point? What does this point do? What does this point do? How did they find the meridians? How did they know the properties of the herbal medicines? Somebody went out, and they picked the plant, they talked to it, they connected to it, right? They connected with the energy bodies, the points, so it was a very long process.
So you would kind of consider those like integrated into
Yeah,
the
I'd say the
same.
classical version of Asian medicine is very shamanic. and they've commercialized it to make it easier to teach. So
Uh-huh.
what you learn in school is very, on the surface, it's easy to test. You can get your licenses, your certifications, all that. Then you go back and you do all the deeper shamanic roots, learning more about the energy medicine, and like qigong works a lot with the energy bodies. A lot of the energy work I do is, I call it like super accelerated Reiki or super accelerated medical qigong, right?
Mm,
It's all working with the energy frequencies. Yeah.
yeah. What would you say in terms of, physical ailments that manifest? Like, how would you relate that to what somebody is experiencing, maybe on a soul or an energetic level?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the person, but it's funny, even in our Pleiadian transmission we just did, somebody was worked on by a Pleiadian. They came in and she's like, I have no more back pain. It's just gone. Right. And so that's what we call, they're working on the spiritual root of the illness, which usually we're holding some sort of, so two things, a mindset that is causing stress, tension in the body, right? Or we're playing out a whole, like a pattern or a frequency of suffering, right? This can go into like deep victim mentality, where someone becomes very disabled. Or, what I see a lot is a lot of people are running some sort of, maybe it's more like a people pleasing, right? Where they keep giving and giving and giving, and then they're totally depleted, right? And again, that's coming back to an emotional, spiritual root of, something happened in this lifetime, probably also connected to other lifetimes. And then we go in and we clear that. So I do a lot of those clearings. Um, or, another one could be, people over exercising, right? So it's not so much they're giving the energy to other people, but they're not listening to their bodies, right? A lot of people that avoid their emotions, right? Because something traumatic happened. They're disassociating. I don't want to look at that. But they go running 5 days a week for 2 hours and then they're on a vegan diet. I was like, well, wait a minute. You're spending all the energy from this pain pattern that's looping, this emotional pattern. Then you're also starving yourself afterwards. Well, of course, you're going to have, I don't know, back pain, insomnia, heart palpitations, sore knees, all of those. And that's where, the energy medicine comes in. And this is how I also got into it more is, you put someone on the table, do an acupuncture session, and you realize, well, they're kind of stuck. Why isn't this moving? And it's because I call it the hole in the bucket, right? It's whatever that pattern is that then is causing this lifestyle that's the body cannot sustain to occur, right? So you got to get into that spiritual level and clear that. And then sometimes it clears up right away. But if it's really set into the physical level, then there needs to be the dietary changes. And then the herbal medicine just accelerates that. I call it, it's like superfood, right? It's very condensed, nutrient dense. It has a very high property content for doing certain things. But all of it together then just reharmonizes and rebalances. And then you can permanently move out of, going back into those spaces because the spiritual root of the illness or the what I call the dis-ease, right? The disharmony has been cleared. You're done playing out that karmic loop, right? You're now stepping into who you truly are and co-creating with the divine, ultimately moving into what you're here to do, what you're here to offer, and let the universal intelligence come through you and create that through you.
Hmm. I love that so much. And it's so helpful to hear those examples because I feel like everyone listening can relate to that on some level,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, because the body is always talking to us, and
Mm-hmm.
we always are in every now moment, we're getting, messages from our body, from our emotional body. And the more that we attune to that, the more that we, can get this wisdom that is ever present. And I love, the idea of really being able to fully clear any type of patterns that are, holding us back. So, I know for
Yeah.
you, um, you have had such a magical experience with Mount Shasta, and it's something that
Oh
I'm
yeah.
really curious about. And I know that you lead, retreats and events. And
Yeah.
what is the energy like in Mount Shasta, especially, currently?
Oh, currently, that's a good question because it shifted a lot this last August. It's like it was a new mountain. There's a new energy field it felt like it was beginning to grid in, and they actually asked me to come back this next year with, the focus being on bringing in new frequencies that are only available there. So what I was told is that, as the frequencies shift on Earth, the vortexes get kind of the full download, right? And then you can see it kind of like creating this network between all the vortexes that are on Earth that then builds the frequency network. So it just felt a little bit almost like going to a foreign place this last August. I was like, oh boy, something big is coming, right?
Yes.
And then, we did the Gateway Guardian Angelics October, November, and December of last year because they're saying, we're going to help you ascend through all of this because everything is changing. And I'm like, okay, who am I to argue with that? And now that we're on the other side, I'm like, oh yeah, you guys weren't kidding. There is a lot of shifting taking place. It's the frequency is increasing, and I call it, the ceiling is being raised. And as the ceiling is being raised, all of us light workers, we're always working to, stay at those highest frequencies and then help everybody kind of, come into them and adjust with them. But when the ceiling gets raised, everybody gets dragged up, which means that people aren't doing this work, all their stuff is just going to kind of spill out of, yeah, you can't bring that with you, right? You can't bring that up. And so it's a little bit of chaos, right? Where
Yes.
everything is just kind of like, oh, we got to unpack all of this and say, well, I'm going to bring this, I'm going to bring this, I can bring this. Okay, let's go, right? But, that process is now unfolding, right? And it takes a while to go through all the systems that are here on planet Earth, right? Because they've been in an old frequency that's now not here anymore. So everything is, dismantling. Yeah. So it is a very powerful shift that we are going through, but it's been known, it's in the astrology. A lot of the ancient shamanic cultures, they've been talking about this for a long time. So, they told me do this because it's coming. I said, okay.
Yes. And
So
if you are,
there's a whole plan. So don't worry.
yeah, I know. And I do find that reassuring sometimes. It's like, oh yeah, this is part of the plan. I know this, and
Yeah.
we can look at astrology or we can look at, other types of guidance to really attune to that. I'm curious for
Mm-hmm.
you when you connect with the energy of this year, the astrology, the shifts that you kind of alluded to. How would you describe the energy of this year?
Oh, it's just continuing the dismantling. I mean, we've been dismantled personally. Everyone's been dismantled. So now the clarity can be seen in the systems that are no longer serving, right? They're old, they're outdated. And most of this is just going to be like government, larger institutions, So it's, good to streamline your existence in those or to make sure that it's solid, right? That you're in alignment with where you are in those systems. Because if it's out of alignment, it's just going to get more out of alignment.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's where, I see the dismantling is larger scale at this point. And of course, there's what people are calling the bifurcation, the splitting of the energy. And Bashar did a really great channeling. I'm sure you're familiar with Bashar, Daryl Anka. I'm sure he's been on here. He did a great channeling of this earlier on, and maybe it was like 2019. And he talked about it being like a glass wall between, and it's just like this thick wall, and you can see someone in this other dimensional resonance over there and you're over here. He said, well, you can go through the wall if you want to, down into that frequency, but you're going to feel it, right? And you're going to be in that space. And in Akashic Enlightenment, they kind of call it, and they do this on a more interpersonal level where it's, they call it believing another person's lie. Like, this is where you're coming into the narratives or these false karmic frequencies that somebody else is playing out. And you can stay in your own space when you're able to sense that and not getting caught up in it, and then going into this false reality with them, right? And so that was already kind of there always, but now it's on a global scale, right? So I've seen some spiritual teachers who've been here like since the 60s or 70s are like, man, I'm glad I did all this back then, because these days, if you're going through awakening, you've got a lot going on, right? Because the world is changing so much, although it was changing a lot then as well. But yeah, there really is that sense of you really have to become more conscious and aware and aligned, so you're not getting dragged into these narratives. Because there are some souls, like, no, I want no part of this, I'm not ready. And that's where the bifurcation happens. And those people just, they kind of drop out of your life, out of your field. And that's just how it goes, and then new people come in that are in the frequency that you're in. So yeah, a lot of shifting around.
Yeah, truly. I got chills as you were describing that because
You resonate with it, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And, I think
That's happening to you.
I think it is, recognizing and holding our own frequency that feels so deeply important right now. There's definitely been periods of time where we've gone through tremendous shifts, but what is happening right now is so, you know, intense on a collective level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. You say that the stakes are higher.
Yes, that's a
Or
great, yeah,
bigger.
figure. I want to go back to Mount Shasta
Yeah, I
and
had a feeling. You're digging for something there. I'm like, oh, what is it she really wants from there? I'm not quite sure.
and
Have you
so
been?
I haven't. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, the word or the words spiritual pilgrimage have been kind of coming through recently.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
and
that's fun. I was just gonna say, I really love 80s movies. That's the other thing, I'm kind of really normal or traditional on the other aspects of it, but I love movies. I've connected with a spiritual teacher in Akashic Enlightenment and A Course in Miracles, and he uses movies as teaching modalities. So I've connected to movies as kind of bringing through messages. But I was called to binge the Crocodile Dundee movies, which all took place in the 80s, and they also took place in Australia. But he's raised by the Aborigines. And so he has these abilities to connect with animals. It's so shamanic. And I was like, oh my God, I never realized this. And then I just went on this deep dive and I found this beautiful book of, it's called The Mutant Message. And it's a story of a woman who does a walkabout with the Aborigines, and she basically just sheds all of her dense humanity. And the Aborigines that she's with, they're talking about connecting with universal oneness, and they do energy healing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing.
yeah,
This is you're talking about a spiritual a pilgrimage. You need to do a walkabout, right? Where you go where spirit guides you, and you allow yourself to be stripped down, to come back to your true self, which I mean, her book is great because, man, she goes through some pain and suffering, right? And that is also part of the journey, is shedding all of those false beliefs. But that's funny that you're hearing that,
yeah,
because that's kind of like the message right now that seems to be coming through for everybody, right?
yeah. It's so funny that you brought that up because I was listening to an interview. Do you know Sandra Walter? She
I
is.
do. I do. Yes. In Shasta?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
she
yeah,
was
yeah.
talking about how, and I didn't realize this about her story, is that she for 7 years basically camped out in Mount Shasta and was living out of a hammock outdoors. And I just found that story so inspiring. I was like, wow, because that's a very courageous thing to do. And I think it speaks to just releasing and anything and going into nature and there's a part of me that absolutely is so drawn to that.
That sounds like a calling for you. Each soul is going to have their own pilgrimage or walkabout that they need to do, but you're going to feel that pull, that draw to do it, right? And it's going to be different for each soul, right? We're all coming in with a different template of where we're starting from other lifetimes. But yeah, it sounds like you got a calling to kind of cut loose and have a bit of an adventure.
Yeah, Mount Shasta, here I come.
Yeah, well, we'll see you at the retreat in August.
Yes, I
We'll
do.
go
I want to
play.
hear more about that.
Yeah, we'll go play with the extraterrestrials and yeah, right now you want to hear more about it?
Sure. Yeah, tell me more.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're jiving with this Mount Shasta energy. Yeah, so actually I have a friend, a shamanic peer who does journeys and pilgrimages and retreats up there. And I went to a couple of his while I was in acupuncture school, and then I met some extraterrestrials. I met the Arcturians up there during his retreats, and then I met the Aquilorians while I was up there. And then they told me, okay, now you have to start bringing people here. Like the torch is passed. You were the student. Now you are supposed to do this. And I started bringing people up there, and we go up to the top of Mount Shasta. You know, we focus on doing ET contact during the evening, right? And then we connect with the sacred sites during the day, right? And when you go, there's a whole respect that needs to be paid to Mount Shasta, right? And you gotta dial in, you gotta listen, or you could have a bit of a rough experience. Okay, so you really have to honor the power that is there, because yeah, it's breaking you down, and there are different spots on the mountain, and they're almost like portals where you're unlocking deeper levels of yourself when you visit each of these places. And I've noticed that as in they guide me through these places and kind of the order in which to visit them depending on the energy. But traditionally there seems to be a connection of connecting with the water element and cleansing, and then connecting with the different parts and places on the mountain, depending on what the retreat is focusing on, right? So different retreats are going to have different intentions. Even if we are connecting with the galactic beings every evening, there's just a different way to go about that. And you can stay at different places and locations and do the retreat a little different. So we'll visit the sacred sites. I do some meditations that guide us through with Akashic Enlightenment, and we connect and just allow the energy to come in to help align us with the energy and the frequencies that are there. And it's kind of like, okay, once you have more or less paid homage, right? So in the shamanic tradition, it's kind of like if you take something, you have to leave something. If you take a stick, you need to leave some of your hair, right? And if you are going to enter the sacred shrine, you need to unwind from everything that you're carrying with you first
Mm.
so that you can hear what's going to come through. So then when we do the evening meditations, we're up on the mountain. I teach everybody how to go into Akashic Enlightenment. That is the tool that I was given and taught to teach. So that's what I teach. And so we all go in. And so we're all in this high frequency space. And there are some shamanic spirits that are there that come in, and they usually, do saging and connect with us. And then there's all types of different beings that come in, but I usually do a light language transmission, and we set the intention for allowing whatever's highest and best for us to be aligned to be connected and brought in. And then I do the light language, and then the show begins. And sometimes, there's ships up above, but those of us that are clairvoyant, you can see the beings come out. They're doing healing work on us. The Aquilorians, I work with them primarily, but also the Pleiadians, Arcturians, Andromedans show up. And also I've met many other beings just like kind of passing by. Sometimes we'll do Dr. Stephen Greer, he has the CE5 contact app. He's got some recordings. If you play the contact recordings, it brings in a different frequency. It kind of opens up the portal to a lot of different beings to come in. And then you kind of select who you have a connection to or a higher purpose with. But yeah, I'd say, it takes some experience to navigate all of that. And it really depends on the group. Some people are a little bit more afraid, right? So you got to work through your different levels of fear of connecting with the spirits and then connecting with extraterrestrials, right? And they sense that and they're very respectful of that. But we've got some great video and pictures that people have gotten. I do have that on my YouTube channel. I put together some video of the different beings that come through. They have different shapes and sizes and just like bright orbs of light. Some of them look like little neon green centipedes that fly through, and it's palpable. When
Yeah.
you're up there. Like one time, like the energy, it shifted when the contact started happening, and it went from being so cold to about like, I don't know, 75 degrees. It was like so warm, calm, peaceful. You're like, oh yeah, contact is happening. You're like, there's nothing on earth, that could just change the entire temperature in that one little area there. And then you see the ship and you see the light and you feel the contact. And then I hear what they're saying. And some of the others that have done more of the retreats or more of the Akashic Enlightenment work are able to bring through the messages. And it really depends on how much practice you do. The more practice, the easier the connection, the more that your higher abilities kick in, the clairvoyance, the telepathic communication, being able to understand things that are taking place. So it really depends on all the work that you're doing before you get there as well.
Okay, so first,
Did I answer your question?
sounds magical and incredible. And yes, please. We will definitely include a link. Is it sherrymosley.com where people can go
Yep.
to learn more about
Yep.
this magical experience?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. And then, if anybody's listening and they're like, wow, that sounds amazing. I would love to have contact with higher dimensional beings. I would love to channel and all of these things that you're, describing. Do you feel like everyone has these abilities?
Yeah, I wouldn't even really call them abilities, as it is your natural higher sense of being, right? You're letting go of the five senses and connecting to the higher senses. And it really just takes practice. And sometimes you've done more work in other lifetimes, right? So, like I said, I was born psychic, right? There's a blood lineage there. Okay, and it usually gets passed on from like mother or father to the child, and they're just born that way, right? So the knowledge is being transferred. So some people already have this from their soul families, and then others, they're learning, and they got to put in the work. You got to put in the hours, whether it's this lifetime or another. But yeah, everybody can connect. And the other thing I say is, don't compare also, because maybe you're meant to be clairsentient, like powerfully working with the energy and not see and hear, right? It really depends on what your alignment is for this lifetime at that present moment as well, right? So it's best not to pine for abilities that you don't have, and to work with who you are as a soul being in this present time and incarnation. Yeah.
It's so true. We all have our own unique way of expressing and feeling. And yeah, I saw sort of like a dark tunnel as you were describing that, and just being able to really trust and surrender and to see or feel in a different way.
Yeah, it really is just getting out of your own way, letting go of the fear, right? And that's why I tell people, or people just feel drawn usually when they come to my website. They're like, oh, I feel so drawn to do this class or this training, or I want to do this, or I got to download this transmission and do that. And it's kind of like an autopilot that takes place internally. Yeah. But, if you really want to get into it deep, I suggest doing the one-on-one Akashic Enlightenment training levels 1 and 2, and then going to Shasta, because you're already, when you practice with me one-on-one, there is a frequency transference that's occurring, right? Where your energy bodies are learning and gridding off of mine while you're doing the work,
Mm.
right? So it accelerates the process. It's kind of the more ancient way of teaching, right? You do one-on-one and you train.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sherry, I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
I know, that's why I said, how much time do you have?
Yeah. Well, I have to have you back on the show sometime. I am loving this conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just, would love to know if there's any, last words of wisdom that you would like to share with our listeners.
Ooh. Aqualorians would like to bring some energy through. Oh. All right. You may feel it already starting to come in here. So we're just going to allow them to bring through what they're going to bring through. Right, so again, we're connecting to the Aqualorians and the Aqualorian crystal and light healing. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, a lot of love. Yeah, it's just deep, immersive, pure, unconditional love. Oh, there's a whole party of them showing up now. I see the angelics showing up, and it's like the whole team is coming together now. They're really just welcoming all of you to come through, knowing that you are fully supported. You're never alone in this process. There's so much love. So much love. You are so, so loved. There is no need to feel alone or to have any fear in this process that you're all going through. Know that the plan is already written. Everything is okay. A lot of reassurance. They won't let anything really bad happen. Everything is okay. There are bumps along the road, challenges to help you grow, but everything is for your highest and best. And the sooner and faster you can surrender to this and allow them to support you, asking for their help and support, the faster it'll all go. Mhm. And they're also sending an invitation to those who feel called to connect. Mhm. Mhm. Starting to slow down now. We'll do a little light language as well. Shutua shara neshe twa asho, totwa shana no, twa shana no sho ata kata akate osho, toto kosho nare taru uto, torare shioto, toshara o, toshara nea tasha o hoku asha, ashare o hotu, hotura aro o, aro shea o ona ne a, o are sheha, ashe aho osho horo o, Osho a no ta ashe. O to ashe o ora eta o. Eto to ashe. To ashe ta asha ora ashe a. Tosha no sha no shere. Eshe u toashano. Tiashono nene asha ata. Kasha utu. Kutu a sho toashe. Toashe asha ro utu. Tona ne. Ne asho tada. Tora ne ahatu ukoshe. Koshete. Te kokoa na. Tokua yana nasha ata. Asha ata narato noto noto rarete atura utoro atura renane atuna tora nea nu te anu nea tu tara tara tuku tua ratatea arate tuku tuashe tara ne te atunta tara te atura tana Teatana no totora na tora oto toro toa tara totora ratate ato toro to shaoro oto. The angelic kingdom, Shambhala, the place of a pure enlightenment, is available to you at any time. You are always welcome. You only need to ask. We're just allowing this to settle in. Mm. There's so many beings here right now. It feels like a large meet and greet. So anybody who sees this, your team, your being is here, and they're calling you to connect with them, and they're connecting to you. You have to ask. They can't interfere with your own free will. You have to ask, and they are here, and they want to connect with you. How are you doing? Emotional yet?
Yeah, that was incredible. I feel so peaceful and
Yeah,
so
it's okay to cry. Heck, makes a lot of people cry too. That's very common. That's what I mean. The energy is so humbling. You want to cry because it's so pure love. You
yeah.
know. Mm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for bringing that through, for sharing your
Yeah.
light, for wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
grace, so much
Thank
honor,
you. Yeah.
gratitude for you.
Well, they're all saying thank you. They're also just kind of hanging out. It's quite a collective. You know when you see those movie posters, the 80s style, where it has all the characters poking out? You know what I mean? Like with
Yeah.
Stranger Things and all that. It's like that. There's like, Arcturians and the Masters are here. All the angelics, you got Metatron and Jesus and their whole teams behind them and Galactic Federation. They're all lined up. It's a big meet and greet just for you.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
much gratitude.
yeah. I get really giggly when this happens. Oh my god. It's just so much energy coming through. Oh, ah, mm, oh yeah, yeah. Ah, mm, mm. Ah, mm. What a pleasure.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to honor you again and thank you. This has been amazing. Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah, they're thanking you for creating this place and platform to bring through all of their messages, all of the energy and love that they have to provide. Because without that, there are so many that don't know what they're able to do and what is available. So thank you.
Mm. So welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.